Hello and welcome to this third session in the module Coaching and Mentoring, and in this session we're going to be looking at building relationships. In order to build a relationship with another person, we first need to be aware of ourselves. We need to be aware of what makes us tick and what makes us us. In order to do that, it requires a certain amount of reflection, and reflection is a key word. To begin with, we're going to look at attachment styles and the theory of Hazen and Shaver from 1987. You may have come across attachment before in the work of John Bowlby. In the 1950s, Bowlby developed his theory of attachment based on the work of Konrad Lorenz. Briefly, Bowlby's theory proposed that the first few years of life are crucial in determining who we are to become. This is known as an infantile deterministic theory, meaning that our infant years determine what we are to become as adults. However, when you've covered attachment theory within the scope of your degree program, you're likely to have concentrated on the attachment styles as displayed by children. Today we're going to be looking at attachment styles as displayed by adults. So what do Hazen and Shaver say? There are 4 different types of attachments according to the theory, and the first one is the ambivalent attachment. As we can see here on the left hand side, there are behaviours as displayed by children, and that's contrasted or compared with behaviours that are shown by adults. You can read those for yourself and spend more time in the other presentation. However, I think a key idea with the ambivalent attachment is to imagine a clingy child. Within adults, those who are ambivalently attached can either be reluctant to engage with other people and form relationships as they are very wary of other people, but also become distraught when relationships end. Hence, they don't handle breakup very well. The second type of attachment, and 3 of these are deemed to be unsatisfactory, with only 1 deemed to be a satisfactory attachment style. So let's have a look at the other unsatisfactory attachment styles. And this is the avoidant attachment. Typically, as displayed in adults, we might see this as a detached person, a person who invests no time or effort getting to know other people. And this clearly can be seen as a barrier if we come to work with children and families, in that our client group can see us as aloof and detached and not really interested in the thoughts, feelings and day-to-day lives of those that we work with. Clearly not a good attachment style within the coaching and mentoring skill set. The third attachment style is the disorganized attachment. And we can see in this particular slide that the comparison is between a 1-year-old child and a 6-year-old child, which is in contrast to the other slides which compare children with adults. And this is adapted from the work of Main and Cassidy 1988. It comes from very, very inconsistent parenting. For example, the parenting that is shown by alcohol or drug abusing parents. The child is unable to gauge the mood of the parent, whether the parent is high or drunk or sober. For example, the behaviour shown to a child whilst the parent is drunk might be favourable. When the child repeats that behaviour, the child may be severely admonished whilst the parent is sober. Hence, the child doesn't know how to act. The final attachment style is the secure attachment, and you can spend more time reading these for yourself. This is the preferential attachment style and forms a good basis for any work that involves helping others. As you can see, parts 3 and 4, in that adults should be comfortable with sharing feelings with friends and partners, and also, importantly, number 4, that they seek out social support. There may be a myth out there that secure attachment equals a Superman type complex in which we are completely self-reliant and self-sufficient. This is not the case. The securely attached person knows when it's time to request help from others. We've just looked at attachment styles as being basically a life script, if you like, that we have a preference towards one of the 4 styles which determines all of our social interactions. However, I'd like to now look at social interaction on a case-by-case basis. Any social encounter or interaction can leave us feeling in one of these possible states: a win-lose state, a lose-win state, a lose-lose state, and a win-win state. Within the win-lose state, within the social interaction, we feel that we've come off better in whatever way we evaluate the social interaction than the other person. In fact, we may go into interactions seeking to win and forcing the other person to lose. Within a coaching or mentoring scenario, this is not preferable, as if we seek to win at the mentee's expense, the mentee may perceive us as hostile and aggressive. The lose-win dyad involves us feeling that we lost coming out of an interaction and the other person won. The lose-lose interaction is when both leave the interaction feeling that no progress or nothing beneficial occurred. And the final one, the win-win situation, is where both parties feel they got something from the interaction. It's not necessarily the same thing, but both people took a complementary part from the interaction. You might reflect, for example, at the moment, how do you see the learning experience of attending lectures? You were asked in the previous session to spend the following week, which was last week, reflecting on any social encounters that didn't go to plan or resulted in some kind of conflict at some level. So within this session, we spent some time recounting and reflecting on that experience that did not go right and what were the features of that encounter. Could we categorize them according to the win-lose to win-win dimensions? Within the other presentation, you're advised to watch this silent scene and try and extrapolate as much information as you can from the video without the sound turned up. What sort of body language and facial expressions do you see in the scene? Can you make sense of what is happening without listening to the sound? As we saw from the video, lots of our communication is not verbal. This is supported by Albert Mehrabian's rule of 55-38-7%. 55% of our communication is actually non-verbal or based on body language and expressions. We are visual creatures. 38% is gleaned from the tone of voice and the manner in which something is said, whilst only 7% relates to the content or actual information, the vocal, verbal, rather, information expressed. So only 7% of our communication is verbal. The vast majority relies on how things appear or how things sound. Furthermore, Paul Ekman writes that we are hardwired to intuitively read social situations with high levels of accuracy. There's a task within There was an individual task within the session where you were asked to look at 7 faces and determine which emotion those faces were showing. You are able to access those materials elsewhere in the learning materials for this session. Communication is fundamental in building relationships. So let's now have a look at communication. What are the barriers to communication? And here we have a number of those. Some of those barriers relate to the fact that we are unable to effectively listen to the needs of our client group or mentee. What can we do to improve these poor listening skills? Physical distractions impede our ability to listen. Interruptions impede our ability to listen. Egan, in 1994, in his book The Skilled Helper, and this has been updated for 2010, found that there are 4 main areas that practitioners should listen for when actively listening. And actively listening is a key term. First of all, we should listen for experiences of what is happening to the person. What are they telling us is going on? Secondly, what are they telling us about what they are doing or what they are not doing? That is, what are their behaviours? Thirdly, what is their effect? How are they feeling? What are the feelings that arise from the experiences and behaviours? And finally, what is their overall conclusion about what is happening to them? What is their point of view on the matter in talking about their experiences, behaviours and feelings? As well as effectively listening, we can influence interactions by effectively questioning. You may be under the impression that there's only one type of question. However, Nancy Friedman devised that there were actually at least 9 different types of questions involved in active questioning. And you can read those for yourself. We undertook an exercise within the session to come up with examples of each of these 9 questioning types. So in summary, building professional relationships is different to making social relationships. The rules that govern them are different. The work of Ekman shows us that we form judgments about people very quickly, and this may have negative consequences for doing effective work with that person, and we explored that within the session. And we explored that in the session if we had negative feelings towards a child in a classroom, for example. Morabian shows us that the vast majority of communication is based on non-verbal information. So when we're trying to communicate effectively, we need to be aware of the non-verbal messages that we're sending out. The professional relationship has a different set of expectations, including higher levels of responsibility placed on the professional, i.e. you. Unlike most personal social relationships, we might have to build and maintain relationships with many people we do not intuitively like. Guidance and legislation, which we covered in the values session, but we will continue to refer to, on diversity and equality, for example, determines that we must work with people to deliver a fair service. However, in reality, it's difficult to police all our social interactions, hence the importance of a strong value base in our practice, and we must refer to our individual value base, professional value base, rather than be overly reliant on knowing all the guidance and legislation, as conceptually this is probably not feasibly possible, and it also changes frequently. In order to build relationships, we must be able to reflect on our values and behaviour. Egan, 1994/2010, has analysed active listening and the 4 features of engaging in active listening. You might practice these skills in everyday conversation by focusing on the speaker's experience, behaviour, feelings and point of view. So we have 4 practical listening tools there. The power of stories, which we'll look at later, and the telling of stories are fundamental within the mentoring relationship. Egan's active listening can help you be more attentive to these stories. Effective questioning, that of Friedman, can enable people to tell their stories more effectively. Friedman provides us with guidance on 9 different questioning styles. Reflect on these. Do you tend to use one or 2 more than the others? Might another style be more useful in certain situations? So here we have another 9 tools to go along with Egan's 4, the 9 tools of effective questioning.